Okay, so today we are diving into one of the most powerful myths in all of Western literature, the legend of Dr. Faust. But we're not just talking about the famous story. We're going to talk about its forgotten and honestly kind of bizarre sequel.
You know the one, right? It's become a total archetype. The brilliant, ambitious scholar, so hungry for knowledge that he's willing to transcend human limits, so he makes a pact with a demon. He trades his eternal soul for ultimate power and wisdom. It's this huge tale of ambition and, of course, terrifying consequences. So, the original story from 1587, the Faustbuch, it ends with Faust being just gruesomely torn apart, his soul literally dragged down to hell. Feels pretty final, right? But then, just a few years later, a sequel pops up that asks this really fascinating question: what happens next?
That's right. The story actually keeps going, but it follows Faust's own servant, a guy named Christoph Wagner. And through him, the legend takes this really sharp turn, and it transforms a one-of-a-kind tragedy into something way more common, almost comical, and, in a way, even more terrifying.
All right, let's get into it. To really get why the sequel is such a parody, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of the original story. We need to set that baseline. Just who was Dr. Faust? Yeah, it's so important to remember how Faust is framed in the original. He wasn't just some greedy or evil guy. He was this tragic intellectual, a deep thinker whose sin came from this hubristic, almost philosophical desire to know everything, to basically grasp the divine. His experiments were cosmic, and his pact with the demon Mephistopheles, well, that was a heavy philosophical transaction.
And that's really the key right there. Faust's fall was so epic precisely because his ambition was so grand. He was a monumental sinner, a true, one-of-a-kind genius whose damnation became the stuff of legend. And that sets a very, very high bar for anyone thinking about following in his footsteps.
So now let's see how this grand tragedy gets a very strange second act. Enter his servant, Christoph Wagner, who apparently decides that what his master did looked like a pretty good career move.
The story picks up literally right after Faust's horrific end. Wagner finds his master's library of books all filled with forbidden knowledge. The source material actually calls this a theological contagion, which is such a cool phrase. It's like sin itself is a disease that's being passed down from master to apprentice.
Now here's the crucial point. Wagner was not naive. He saw firsthand, with his own eyes, what happens when you make a deal with the devil. He had the ultimate warning. And yet, he still makes the conscious choice to do the exact same thing. This isn't some noble quest for knowledge. This is just a willful imitation of a path he knows leads to ruin.
Now remember, Faust's pact was with Mephistopheles, this powerful, terrifying figure who really represented the profound gravity of his sin. You know, the stakes could not have been higher.
So Wagner follows the instructions in the book, he does the incantations, and he gets ready to meet his own demonic servant. Given everything we've just said, you'd expect something equally dreadful, right? Nope. He summons a demon named Auerhahn, who shows up in the form of a monkey. I mean, sometimes a large bird, but yeah, mostly a monkey. And just like that, the high tragedy of Faust gets its first big dose of low comedy.
And this moment right here just brilliantly illustrates the entire point of the sequel. It's a deliberate parody. It takes all these monumental themes from the original Faust story and just systematically shrinks them down, transforming this deep philosophical tragedy into an episodic satire.
I mean, this comparison really lays out the contrast perfectly. Across the board, from their motivations to the form of their demon sidekicks to how they use magic, we see this deliberate shift from the grand to the completely mundane. Faust's cosmic quest for knowledge is replaced by Wagner's desire for practical power and, doing some magic tricks. The entire tone just shifts from this monumental tragedy to something much more satirical and, let's be honest, kind of silly.
The sequel's plot is often described as a fading echo. It follows the same basic beats. You've got the pact, the use of power, and then the inevitable damnation. But instead of a deep psychological drama, it becomes this picaresque adventure story, just following Wagner and his monkey demon as they travel around Africa and the Orient.
So why do this, right? Why turn a great tragedy into a comedy? It might seem like it kind of lessens the impact, but the author of this story actually had a much more chilling and universal warning in mind.
The core idea here is that evil doesn't just die with one person, it persists. The Chronicle presents sin like a hereditary disease, right? An infection that can be caught and passed on.
So Faust's death didn't end the danger. It basically just opened up a job vacancy for the next sinner.
And this is how that cycle works. Faust's sin, that was the origin point. His damnation, that should have been the warning. But Wagner's choice to imitate him, well, that's the infection spreading. What was once a unique tragedy has now become a repeatable cycle.
And this, right here, is why it all matters. Faust was exceptional. His fall was terrifying but also kind of distant. I mean, most of us aren't world-renowned scholars with cosmic ambitions, but Wagner, he's just a regular guy who wants to be like his boss. The story's message is that you don't have to be a genius to be damned. Ordinary, imitative ambition is more than enough to get you there.
So let's wrap this up by looking at how this lesser Faust, this total imitator, surprisingly managed to carve out his own unique place in literary history.
So in that 1593 sequel, Wagner's whole job was to be a distorted mirror of Faust. He was a cautionary tale, there to prove that even a second-hand, knock-off version of a sin leads to the exact same, very real damnation. The consequences, those are not a parody.
But what's really fascinating is what happened to this character later on. In the 1593 book, he's the practical magician. But centuries later, in Goethe's masterpiece, Faust, Wagner evolves into a completely new archetype, the dry, pedantic, by-the-book academic who is Faust's foil. This secondary character, who literally started as a parody, became a powerful literary symbol all on his own.
And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. The Wagner Chronicle turned a monumental sin into a reproducible one. It suggests that maybe evil isn't always this grand original act of rebellion, but a lot of the time it's just a faded copy of something that came before. It really makes you wonder, if damnation can be inherited like a set of old books, how much of evil is truly original at all?